Hello guys and welcome to today's second episode of our new series, Forgotten Seasons, where we talk about some Real Madrid seasons that have perhaps gone under the radar in previous years because of the fact that they're next to some more, let's just say some more remarkable, let's just say some more well-regarded Real Madrid seasons. And so today we'll be looking at the 15-16 Real Madrid season and what it held for our team. And yeah, it's going to be an exciting one today. Definitely one that doesn't get talked about at all. It was obviously the start of our three-peat, and it was the start of the Zidane era at Real Madrid, and overall it just doesn't get talked about as much as the 16-17 season. Definitely gets talked about a lot more than this season. And I think other seasons around it were looked at as better seasons for, like we talk about Cristiano as well. And so yeah, I think this was peak La Liga era. We were right in the middle of it, right in the thick of it, and La Liga was starting to heat up at this point, and it was like MSN versus BBC was really getting at it at this point, and you could feel the tension at this point. So definitely one to talk about. Let's start about the context to this season. I mean, the 14-15 season. It was a disappointing season, disappointing way to end the season in 14-15 because we ended up going trophyless in terms of the big three trophies. Barcelona ended up winning the treble, and all three trophies we had lost quite badly in bad fashions. In the semi-finals we lost against Juventus. In a game which I just felt like we could have won that easily, but it would have set up an El Clasico final, and that was one of the biggest what ifs. What if Real Madrid had won against Juve in that semi-final and they had played against Barcelona in the final in Berlin? That would have been so cool, and potentially we could have been talking about a 5P, which is ridiculous, but that's for another day talking about that. And then we had obviously been knocked out by Atleti in the Copa del Rey, following the winning season the previous year, and we just fell short of Barcelona, 2 points behind Barca in the league, and it just felt like everything we just fell a little bit short of. And a lot of it was down to that Modric injury in the latter stages of the season, where Modric got injured and suddenly the team just felt like it was just unravelling, slowly and surely just started to unravel. It was a fantastic start of the season. I remember Cristiano had some ridiculous... that start of that season, the 14-15 season, he was on something. There was, they should have drug tested that man, because that guy was ridiculous at that start of that season, and unfortunately just unravelled, and in the end it ended up leading to Ancelotti's eventual sacking at the end of the season, and so a new season had to begin. So what were your thoughts on that 14-15 season, in which everything just fell short quite just a little bit, and Barcelona ended up winning the treble?
Well, the 14-15 season was a season where we played some of the best football over the past decade, if I'll be honest. That's between October and November, late September and early November, when Bale got injured, and we played that 4-4-2 with Isco and James on the wide midfield positions, and Ronaldo and Benzema up top. In these games we destroyed Barcelona, Liverpool, big teams. We blown away teams like Blancos, we blown away teams like Granada in the league, and that's when our attack of fluid, our midfielder Toni Kroos and Luka Modric, when they were so young, the midfield too, they just control the game, and Isco and James coming infield to play, and combined as well, we just dominated everything, so of course we were on track to win everything, because Barcelona, the MSN didn't start clicking at that time, and we were on track to win everything. We were favourites, and of course things slowed down in January. We had injuries, players got tired, like you said, with Luka Modric injury. The squad was fatigued. Toni Kroos was fatigued. He was fatigued whilst playing as a defensive midfielder in a midfield tray of his squad, and he gets to end the season. So that was a bit difficult for him. And of course, with no defensive midfielder, we struggled in the latter stages of the season. And we lost the big important matches, and of course it cost Ancelotti his job. Of course, it just opened up a whole lot of questions on Bale, because Bale's form had dropped drastically. And of course, Ancelotti not just Bill Ancelotti, but also on the midfield, because that's when they said we needed a defensive midfielder, we needed someone who can replace Xabi Alonso, and that's when Casemiro came from loan, he came back from loan.
Yeah, and overall it just felt like we needed a new start, and Ancelotti was fantastic for us for 2 years, but at this time, if a manager fails at Real Madrid, it was there was only one option at the end of the season, and that was the sack. So 15-16 begins. Rafa Benitez is brought in. I don't think a lot of Real Madrid fans were happy at the time. I think it was not a good appointment post Ancelotti. I felt, for the players and for the fans, I don't think it was a good appointment. But some of the players that came in, Mateo Kovacic was brought in from Inter Milan, Danilo was brought in, Casemiro was brought back from Porto, Kiko Casillas was brought in from Espanyol, Jesus Vallejo, Marco Asensio, who was immediately loaned straight back out, and then Lucas Vazquez was brought in from Espanyol. So on the way out, you saw Azir Ilaramendi go to Real Sociedad, back to Real Sociedad. Sami Khedira left on a free. We lost Iker Casillas finally to FC Porto. He left. Cointran left as well, and then Chicharito entered his loan as well. So you obviously had Chicharito, Chicharito and Khedira and Casillas. Those three, I think, were the most important at this time who left. That was three big departures in terms of Khedira was obviously a very, very good player for us for a couple of years at this point. Chicharito scored that big goal against Atleti in the quarterfinals the previous year, and then Casillas, obviously losing a leader like that at this point was obviously hugely detrimental. Although his form had dropped off at this point, and you could tell that it started to go at this point for Iker Casillas. I think it obviously is a huge loss, and that meant we had to move in Keylor Navas into that goalkeeping spot, and so it was a potential. It could have been really bad for us if Keylor Navas wasn't up to standard, and so it was definitely a risk that we had to be careful of. But what are your thoughts on the summer business that we did, and obviously bringing Rafa Benitez at this point?
I think we did good summer business in terms of we addressed the fact that we need a new defensive midfielder. We got Casemiro back, we got Kovacic. In relation to Danilo, I believe that it was I don't know how do I say that. A lot of fans believe that we had so we didn't need Danilo. But if I'm being honest, Abla was getting older. Maybe Perez thought that maybe I wouldn't say flashier, but more explosive back, but it just never really worked out because he wasn't really. But before we get to that, in terms of Casillas leaving and maybe parting, I think Casillas had to go, in my opinion. I think his performance levels was dropping, and I didn't think he would have wanted to stay and be on the bench again after what happened in the previous season with Santa Chuzzi. I don't think he'd have accepted being a bench player. I think he had to leave because, if I'm being honest, his performance costed us in some big matches, in my opinion, in terms of the fact that he wasn't making the saves that he used to. He was playing years on the decline, and it wouldn't have been fair, in my opinion, for him to stay and be on the bench again, for another day. So I think he had to leave. Chicharito, he didn't make his goal, did his signing permanent, but he would have been an excellent addition as a number 9, because that season again didn't have a number 9. Morata came back the year after, so we sometimes had to utilize his say he was injured as a number 9 sometimes, or maybe another lower game, but I'm not too sure why we did not make that signing permanent. But we had good business. We covered the squad with Lucas, Denis, Shevchev. We still had James, Esco. We had a lot of numbers, and we addressed all of our issues. So it was a solid summer. And I would say I was happy with the incomings. Danilo was he was scoring really wonderful goals, supported from long distance. So maybe it was a flashy signing for the club. So that's why we signed him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of these players maybe aren't the most remarkable, like Gareth Bale for 85 million, something like that. But a lot of these players did form the backbone of our squad depth, and definitely in terms of Casemiro was a huge part to play in this season and many more. So, this business may have gone under the radar for a lot of Real Madrid fans, but it definitely helped us for the years to come. You look at Kovacic, Danilo, Kiko Casilla, and Marco Asensio and Lucas Vazquez. Those players are the backbone of the backup squad, the famous backup squad that we had in 16-17, where we could rotate the squad, and that side itself could probably finish top four in La Liga. So it was a really good bunch of business that we did that year. But let's start to talk about the season, because immediately throughout the first 2 months, I would say, you could tell that it just things weren't going to work with Rafa Benitez. I mean, the first game of the season, a 0-0 draw versus Sporting Gijón, is not a great way to start. And there was two more 0-0 draws coming up with in the first 2 months of the season, and so you could tell that despite all of the attacking power that he had, Rafa Benitez had, just look at Cristiano Ronaldo, for example. At the end of this season, he finished up with 51 goals and 15 assists. With all of that firepower, with him, with Gareth Bale, with Benzema, with Isco, with James, with Hesse off the bench as well. You had Lucas Vazquez as well. All of these guys you had in the team. You can't draw 0-0. That's impossible. That is impossible, and that is one of the main faults I think a lot of Real Madrid fans had with Rafa Benitez, is that his tactics were way too defensive. You just felt like these type of meticulous tweaking and doing this, that, and the other with the defensive structure that Rafa Benitez loves to do, and he could do at other clubs like Valencia, like Liverpool. He could have done that, and he was very successful with that. But you can't do that at Real Madrid, when ultimately you have to play more fluid. You have to play more expressive with Cristiano and Bale and Benzema up front, and so you could just tell that against better teams, against bigger teams, you could tell that Real Madrid struggled hugely. And there was a huge, I think the main one was the 4-0 loss to Barcelona. I remember that game pretty vividly, and I was really, really, really pissed after that game, because you could just tell that it should have been much better than that, but we just got totally unraveled in that game. We got totally outclassed in that game, and at that point, I think you could tell that it was just never going to work with Rafa Benitez at the helm. And you could tell that Rafa Benitez had upset Cristiano, and that is almost a death sentence for a manager at Real Madrid at this point. And so I just felt like Rafa Benitez never had a chance to succeed at Real Madrid. And over this last decade, I think there's been a very, very small handful of managers that haven't worked at Real Madrid, being him, Lopetegui, and possibly Solari. You can group him with them. I think it's very, very clear that it just wasn't going to work, and I just felt like all of the things that make Rafa Benitez are all the reasons why he couldn't work at Real Madrid. So, what were your thoughts on the initial start of the season, leading up to that 4-0 loss against Barcelona on match day 12?
I think Benitez, his biggest sin was he tried to make Bale, tried to play the team around Gareth Bale. Bale is an amazing player and a legend of the club, of course, and I'm not going to say anything negative about him. What I'm going to say is that he's not the type of player you build a Real Madrid around, unless he's the only star player. Like, for example, you build a team around Gareth Bale, you're not getting the best of Cristiano or Benzema, or you're not getting the other attackers into the game, because he's not really a link player. Bale, he can link when he's explosive and he has space, and he can whip a ball into the box, so he can try pass a player and get a player in. But he's not. Bale, Benitez tried to play Bale behind Benzema, with Ronaldo on one side and maybe James on the other side. But he tried to do that to get the best of Bale, because that's what Bale wanted. But I think that impacted the team, and immediately he had to switch back to his normal to his normal 4-3-3 that was utilized to get the best out of Cristiano or Benzema, or even get the midfielders into the game. I think after that, his biggest concern was that he didn't know what his best lineup was. There were moments when the team did well and we got goals, but then there were moments when we were completely overshadowed. We had no idea what we were doing. Tony Kroos wasn't benched a few times in big matches. Isco and James were not integrated well. So sometimes it was Kovacic playing, then Isco played, and James barely played. There was a falling out with James. Isco was barely seeing the field as much. He tried everything in midfield and he just never had a set midfield. He tried Kovacic, Casemiro. And of course, Kovacic, because he was a player who started Casemiro in that convention, I think in November when he played Atletico Madrid, which maybe gave Zidane influenced Zidane's decision to start Casemiro at the end of the season. But I think he didn't know what his best midfield was. He tried so many formations and so many options, and it just didn't really work out for him, in my opinion. Because he had no idea what he's doing in the midfield, the forwards were affected and we had no fluidity. So that's what I think. I think that he just had no idea what his best team was, and he just didn't get the respect of the team because he had no idea what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, at other clubs, you look at Liverpool, he was very much respected by his players and he was allowed to implement whatever ideas he wanted. At Real Madrid, the players have to dictate what you do. And I don't think Rafa Benitez was prepared to do that when he was coming into the club. And eventually that was his downfall because he tried to switch that up straight later into the season when he realised what he was trying to do wasn't working. And so that tries to switch up. It was the complete wrong time, and Real Madrid didn't want to carry that out anymore, and so suddenly he has these problems, and so it just can't work with him anymore, and very much it felt like it was everything unravelled with Rafa Benitez, and it just couldn't work with him, and I think all of that was culminated. I think the one thing where I remember it was like the most ridiculous thing was our Copa del Rey exit. If you recall, it was the 3-1 win against Cadiz. It was a pretty unremarkable game. We would won and we'd advanced, but it turns out we then get expelled from the Copa del Rey because of the fact that we fielded Denis Cheryshev, who wasn't registered, or he was ineligible for the match, and that if that happens, I just don't know how that happens. Like, you've got so many admin teams at Real Madrid. You're one of the biggest clubs in the world. How does that happen? And it just felt like it was quite appropriate for the club you were at that point, where it just felt like things just weren't going right at that point. And so this was another example of that, where it just felt like what kind of stupidity leads to that happening. Leads to an actual exit from the Copa del Rey. It was obvious. I think it was quite typical. I think it culminated everything, all of Rafa Benitez's tenure at Real Madrid, where it just felt like things were just not. It wasn't good enough from Rafa, and so I think that game against Cadiz and that expulsion, I think completely sums it up. So yeah, I mean, what were your thoughts on the exit from the Copa del Rey?
Yeah, honestly. That's something so here that when you think about 90s, that's one of the defining moments. It's barely happened. I don't think it ever happened in our history until then. So immediately he lost an opportunity to win the silver. We were behind in La Liga. We weren't doing well in the Champions League, and of course maybe because that was maybe one of the reasons why the switch was done. In my opinion, I believe honestly that the team didn't believe that he could have. The management team didn't believe that he would have won La Liga, the Champions League, and with the Copa going, they had to make a decision. So I totally understand, exactly why, the decision was made, and of course, it's something that Right now, for example, if that happens, you see so many news about it, like this player was suspended, XYZ, so I'm not too sure why they missed it at 15, 16. I just, those my mind, I have no answer for it. So it's a bit difficult for me to comprehend why it happened, because it's something that it's knowledge you should have, that he scored as well, which made things even worse, so I have no idea. How to even examine that or analyze that, because it's just not supposed to happen. It's something you should detect a while ago, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think it all just became too much. Match day 18 versus Valencia, 4th of January. Rafa Benitez got sacked after a 2-2 draw with Valencia. That game was pretty horrible. We defended really badly, and it just felt like that was the end of the line. It had to be the end of the line, and there was so many rumours at that point. Rafa was getting sacked, and it was over for him. I mean, some highlights from his time. There was the 10-2 win against Rayo Vallecano, which is obviously one of the biggest wins in Real Madrid history. The 8-0 win against Malmo. I don't want to attribute that to Rafa Benitez, to be totally honest, because those two wins were more due to the fact that our team were just really good at scoring goals. So I think that's more of the reason rather than Rafa Benitez. But whatever happened under his tenure, and at this point we're 5 points behind Barcelona, 4 points behind Atleti, and we're third place. It's not looking good. We're bringing Zinedine Zidane, who would, he's been around the club. He's been involved around the club since his retirement in 2006. He's obviously been the assistant manager for Carlo Ancelotti a couple of years ago when we won La Decima. And, there was a bit of scepticism around Zinedine Zidane at this point, whether he was ready to make that step up to being an actual manager. But there was definitely that assurance regarding the fact that he would be able to command the players' respect, which, Rafa Benitez obviously couldn't. And maybe he could bring the team back to basics, which, which obviously Rafa Benitez was not doing. He was making it a lot more complicated and a lot more complex, which obviously is not the formula at Real Madrid. You need to be a lot more simple, and I think Zinedine Zidane was the main thing that he was going to do at Real Madrid. I think the main change that he was going to do at Real Madrid was obviously make Casemiro the DM, the out-and-out defensive midfielder for Real Madrid, and I think this spelled the end for James Rodriguez at Real Madrid, because of the fact that Zinedine Zidane wasn't his biggest fan, but I think it completely worked by putting Casemiro in that defensive midfield slot. We were so much more defensively assured, and that obviously formed the base of our midfield trio of Kroos, Casemiro, and Modric for the next 5, 6, 7 years at Real Madrid. So it was a huge decision from Zinedine Zidane, and one in which, even to this day in 2024, Luka Modric remains, and that we're obviously still trying to find that formula now, to find that midfield dynamic. But obviously that Kroos, Casemiro, Modric midfield three was the biggest thing that Zinedine Zidane did, and it definitely turned around our season that year. So what were your thoughts on the appointment of Zinedine Zidane at that point?
The appointment of Zidane wasn't really satisfactory in my opinion. It's like it's like if we appointed Raul when we sacked Santiago Solari, or when it's basically something that we tried to do when we appointed Santiago Solari. We offered him a 3-year contract and this never worked out. Or maybe if we appointed Raul after Zidane left, something like that in 2021 instead of Ancelotti. I think it was just because Benitez was so bad that we just needed something new. And because we needed something new, maybe anyone would have been okay. To be honest, Iker Casillas maybe could have come back and been the manager, and we would have been happy because we just wanted Benitez going. He didn't suit Madrid, really. Yes, like you said, they were big wins, but he can't really attribute it to Benitez. Even though under Zidane or under Ancelotti, we don't really win big. I'm not too sure why. We just never win like 5-0 or 6-0 or even 8-2, 10-2 like we won against Blancos. Those wins just never happen. And that's maybe due to the schedule as well. When it's like 4-0 or 3-0, let's just take it easy. So that's one of the reasons. But that's the topic for another day. But in relation to since Zidane coming in, anything was better than Benitez, in my opinion. I think he tried to be too formal with the players, maybe too strict sometimes, which of course wouldn't really work out with him. I think it's maybe when Sergio must say that his spec isn't, when there was a rumors of Conte coming in, he said the line, I think it was along, respect isn't guaranteed, it's illegal or something like that. And I think it was the same with Benitez. He never had the respect of the players, despite the fact he had a strong coaching career. Not just of the players, but he didn't convince the fans, he didn't convince the board. So when Zidane came in, it was an upgrade. In Zidane's first 3 games, we won. And I think with Zidane, he just had an idea what he wanted to do. And when he saw something that needed fixing, he fixed it. You mentioned Casemiro at the start. It was a clear trait of Modric, Toni, and Isco. Benzema, Bale, Cristiano, Carvajal, Pepe, Sergio Ramos, Marcelo, Keylor Navas. We realized that we lacked some defensive steel in some matches, and he had Casemiro in the midfield instead of Isco. And he stuck with that at least until the end of the season. And of course, he continued with that until, of course, started the season and Bale got injured and switched to the diamond. But in addition to this season, Zidane just did the simple things, and he kept the players happy and he kept it simple, and he made a lineup that's good, that can get the team to win. It wasn't amazing football, but it was football that was needed to get the team to win some games, help us compete in La Liga, and of course to win in the Champions League. I would take it up the field and say yes, it wasn't a strong caliber of teams we played to navigate through the Champions League, but the fact of the matter was that we won those matches. We won those matches. That was the important thing. Yes, Emma, we won comfortably. Will be 2 goals strong, and we won in the second leg. Manchester City were not strong like they are now, and we won. Not strong teams, but we won. That's the Atletico Madrid in the final. We are always favorites against Atletico Madrid, no matter what, in my opinion. We had a few blips against them that season and a few seasons before, but we are always better than Atletico Madrid, at least in my time. I don't know what happened in the 50, I don't know, about 20, 50 years ago, but from 2000 up, we are always better than Atletico Madrid, so we were the favorites then. In La Liga, we won small games, which we would have dropped points, and we were 4 points behind Barcelona when Benitez was sacked in 2011, because we drew some matches. But then at the end of the season, we kind of fixed it, and we win 1 point of Barcelona at the end of the season, so just commendable. So maybe if we hadn't dropped some points in the early stages under Zidane, then we would have won La Liga. But the main thing was that Zidane saw something and he fixed it, and at the end of the season we were strong. So that's why Zidane had a better impact. It was Zidane who got us to win in the double. Without the double, we only won the Champions League that year. That's it. We didn't win anything. It's just a Champions League. So yeah, it was Zidane who just managed the team, moved a few pieces, and kept it simple. He had a starting 11 that he didn't keep switching, because he knew that with Toni and Luka Modric, he would have control over the game. Casemiro would be the defensive midfielder, and then the attacking trio would have the freedom to play, and that's what he did, and that's how he won, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple dynamics in terms of the squad, very simple roles. You could see the 2 wingers coming inside, Benzema playing left, dropping to the left. You saw the 2 midfielders who were definitely pass dominant. You had 1 defensive midfielder who's defensive. You had two fullbacks who'd get on, and then 2 centre backs who'd hold the line and do all the defensive work, and you'd have Casemiro dropping in. It was very simple, but it was very effective, and we definitely saw that, like you said. Obviously, we started the Zidane era with 5 points behind Barcelona. But going into the match day 31 against Barca, we were now 11 points. But we did win against Barca. It was one of my favourite games as a Real Madrid fan. That game against Barcelona, which was a 2-1 win. It was a very entertaining game, I thought. That game, I really enjoyed that one. In which, it was very, very back and forth, and you could feel like Barcelona could score at any point, but Real Madrid could score at any point. And so eventually it was a 1-1 going into the 85th minute, and Cristiano Ronaldo breaks the deadlock. 2-1, and suddenly it was a winner for Real Madrid, one in which we needed. 8 points now, with 7 games left. We clawed it back, but we just fell short by 1 point. It was very disappointing at the end of the season, because you just felt like if we'd you always have this at the end of the season, if you're 1 point or 2 points behind. It just feels like, if we had just won here, or if we had just nicked a goal here, and then suddenly we're ahead of Barcelona. And that's obviously hindsight, but nonetheless, I think still it was definitely a good omen for the following year, in which you could see that Real Madrid could go on a huge run, in which we were much better than Barcelona, and we could potentially win. And so it was definitely good to see the much improvement, the improvement in the second half of the season, in which we clawed back on Atleti to come second at least, and then we just fell short of Barcelona, unfortunately. But yeah, it was definitely really good from us in the league. And then in the Champions League, round of 16 versus Roma, first leg 2-0, second leg 2-0. Obviously, Ronaldo had that press conference where he walked out, which is obviously still getting used to this day. Very funny, that one. Then the quarterfinals versus Wolfsburg. This was one of my favorite games as a Real Madrid fan. The first leg, we'd been totally dominated in Germany, 2-0, and it just felt like, oh no, we're going out again this year, and it's even more premature than the previous year. But it was like Julian Draxler had a fantastic game in the first leg, and we just felt like, was it the Wolfsburg manager? I can't remember the exact quote, but he was basically telling us to pack our bags, go home. And so second leg, Cristiano Ronaldo. That's all I have to say. Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the most famous comebacks in Real Madrid history, and yeah, definitely was an important one for us. Second, then the semi-finals against Manchester City. It was very, very boring. in complete contrast, it was completely boring. 0-0 first leg, and then the second leg at the Etihad, Gareth Bale broke the deadlock with a fantastic finish. It was in a narrow angle, but yeah, nonetheless, Real Madrid won that one. And yeah, we'll talk about the final against Atleti in a second. But yeah, what were your thoughts on the Champions League run and the final few games of the La Liga season as well?
Going to the Champions League final, the two goals, we won 2-0 against them twice. Against Wolfsburg, you can't blame any Madrid fan for thinking it was over. The comebacks now, it was normal. Having comebacks now in 2022 to 2024, or even 2021, it was normal. But having comebacks then was difficult. We lost to Bayern in the first leg in 2011. 2012, we never came back. We lost to Lyon 2010, we never came back. Dortmund 2013, we never came back. Juventus 2015, we never came back. So having comebacks then was not a Real Madrid thing, in my opinion. It wasn't something that happened often, if I'm being honest.
At least in recent history for Real Madrid.
Yeah, of course in the past. It happened, but the new generation of fans, let's say from the 2000s, never saw it. It was just something we heard of and we read about, but maybe looked at videos, but we never saw it. I think that was maybe something special, when we got that hat-trick from Cristiano and sent us into the Champions League semi-final. I think that was a big moment in our history, because it made us believe, and it was the start of the tribute, of course. It was the start of the tribute. It was something special, in my opinion, very special. You can definitely argue that there were other more important matches that led to that, but it was the first season of something special. So that's why you remember it a lot.
For sure. I think it was really special from us that season, and the way that we came back, it was definitely a formula that we used. We've used and we've rinsed and repeated for the next however many years. So yeah, definitely that was the start of something special for our comebacks. That win against Wolfsburg, and Cristiano Ronaldo obviously started that one. But obviously the final game of the season, the most important game of the season, rematch versus Atletico Madrid in the final. Rematch for 2 years prior in Lisbon, where Real Madrid had managed to steal it just at the end of the match against Atleti. Would it be the same, or would it be a little bit more dramatic, a little bit less dramatic? It was quite boring. I thought there was 2 goals, and then apart from that, it was obviously an Atleti game where they just made sure to shut everything down. Obviously, Antoine Griezmann missed a huge penalty that cost them the game eventually. But I think it was Carrasco that scored for them. Ramos scored, which obviously everyone's going to call offside and stuff like that. I don't really care because the linesman didn't catch it. It's not our problem. But yeah, really important goal from Ramos. I still think that Real Madrid would have eventually scored. Even if Ramos didn't score that goal, just like they did 2 years prior. I think Atleti were unfortunate, but I don't really care. Atleti don't deserve the Champions League anyway. And I think obviously the penalty shootout, I think, is obviously one of the biggest penalty shootouts in Real Madrid history. I mean, what are your thoughts on the game first, and then we'll talk about the penalty shootout next.
Yeah, the game was, I would say, after 1-0, after we scored, there wasn't much in it. You know, I'm not too sure if we were trying to hold Atletico, we were trying to hit on the counter, or we were trying to at least pass the ball. I'm not too sure exactly what we were trying to do, and my memory is a bit vague from that, to be honest. Because I've been 1-0 up for a long time. I honestly can't remember what happened. But what I remember was that we were a bit nervy sometimes, and then when we gave away the penalty, and Griezmann missed it, I wouldn't say that he costed them the game because Atletico Madrid still scored. And of course, I'm a big believer of the butterfly effect when every incident or when something happens can affect the future. Of course, if Atletico Madrid scored then and make it 1-1, then we might have been in the same position when Carrasco scored. Because Carrasco didn't score like late on, like in the 90th minute. He scored, I think, in the 78. Griezmann missed the penalty in the 63rd minute or along that. So I won't say that we had an issue. We had an issue then or there, and Griezmann costed them the game. But I believe that it did give us some confidence. I followed them a bit more, and because of that disparity, I believe that we had the advantage in the shootout, in my opinion. So that's what I would say. We had the advantage in the penalty shootout because he missed.
Yeah, and sorry.
Yeah, because he missed. But other than that, I wouldn't say he costed them the game. But what I would say is that Champions League game, it was really moving because I haven't really seen Madrid in the Champions League penalty shootout until since we lost that one to Bayern Munich in 11-12. So of course there were some flashbacks of that. You know, losing to Bayern at Dortmund and had the fashion was the most painful moments of any Madrid fans. You can really say that Manchester City lost when we lost 1-0. The Juventus lost when we lost 1-0, but it was Bayern Dortmund when we were behind and we came back, and then we were in poor position to qualify, and then we lost some penalties. It was heartbreaking. No Madrid fan really recovered from that until like that. That's when we're still thinking about it because Jose Mourinho didn't get the Champions League trophy, and even he had the best team in the world. But so to lose Atletico Madrid on penalties would have been heartbreaking. That's why I'm happy that we won that. You know, it's really difficult to put into words, you know, how big something like that is for the fans, especially. But we won, and that was really the main thing for me. If I'm being honest, we nearly lost, but we scored every single penalty. You know, every single penalty we scored, and that's just something that we just have to comment, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. I think Going into the penalty shootout, I mean, Atletico have hurt us over these years. With so many times they've just shut us out and managed to score or take points away from us. They've obviously been a huge thorn of our side, but nonetheless we still have the superiority over them in these big games. And I just, every time I think about this final or the final in Lisbon, I just imagine, what if Atleti had won those games? Imagine if Atleti had won in 2014. Do you think Real Madrid would still be searching for La Decima? I think that there could still be a chance of that. And there could still be a chance that Real Madrid could still be on 9 Champions Leagues. And imagine if that had happened, then a lot of, so much different stuff would have happened. I think all of this, we could have signed different players, and all of this, butterfly effect could have happened, and it just feels it could have been so different. Imagine if Atleti had got just 1 Champions League out of the 2, then suddenly all of this superiority talk in Madrid would be different, and so it would be so weird. But I mean, going into the penalties, let's talk about it. First penalty, Lucas Vázquez steps up, spins the ball on his finger, and then dispatches the penalty. Second penalty, Antoine Griezmann scores and makes up for what he did earlier in the match. Second penalty, Marcelo, easy enough, puts it into the corner. The fourth penalty, Gabi, captain of Atleti, scores as well. Gareth Bale, simple enough, and scores himself. Saul scores, and then Sergio Ramos scores, makes up for the penalty he missed a couple years ago in the Bayern penalty shootout. And then Juan Fran, one of the biggest Atleti players, an Atleti legend at this point, steps up, hits the post, and you could just tell the stadium knew it was one, because Cristiano Ronaldo was stepping up. And obviously I mentioned how Ramos missed the penalty a couple years prior against Bayern Munich. Well, so did Cristiano Ronaldo, and he'd promised us to win us a Champions League. And it had been a disappointing season up until this point. The way we went out of the Copa del Rey, the way we started the season, but we clawed everything back, and Cristiano Ronaldo wins us the Champions League in penalties. And yeah, it was a huge penalty, one in which you never had any doubt, because the calmest man in that stadium was obviously the man who was taking the penalty. And so yeah, it was a fantastic feeling to win that penalty shootout against Atleti, knowing that we had won one more Champions League and Atleti was denied another Champions League. Winning the 11th one, undécima, was a huge honor, and it's still one of the best Champions League finals, and it sets us up nicely for the following years to come. Obviously the start of the three-peat, and obviously I think it's the most forgotten out of the three Champions League wins in a row. I think it's the most forgotten, and I think it's definitely one that we have to look back at, because it was the last penalty shootout in a cup for many years in the Champions League, up until last year I believe it was. So definitely one in which all of us enjoyed, and I think it was huge penalty shootout, and definitely a huge win. So obviously last time what we did for the 1920 season was I gave it a rating out of 10 in terms of how underrated that season was. For me, I think this season I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I gave the 1920 season a 7 out of 10, but I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10 because of the way it set us up for seasons in the future. And I think, it was the start of something great with Real Madrid over these next few years. So, yeah, what were your thoughts on this season, and what would you give it out of 10?
Out of 10, in terms of what it set us up for, I would say Cardinal is like an 8 or 9. In terms of if you compare to how we played and how exciting it was in the 16-17 season, the 17-18 season, I would say it's maybe like 7, because I think the goals that we scored against Bayern and Atletico Madrid and against Juventus over those past 2 seasons, from 2017 to 2018, I believe. Yeah, the 2017 knockouts and the 2018 knockouts, the goals we scored, everything was exciting, end-to-end, nail-biting, and then Cristiano hat-tricks, Cristiano bicycle kicks. it was amazing. We were a better team then, so of course it was more exciting. But we can't deny that that season was important, and the team knowing that we can win these important competitions. And of course that's what it did. You can see that the team was always favorites, at least until Zidane left. So we can't deny how important it was whatsoever.
For sure, and I think I think that is it for today. And this episode 2 of Forgotten Seasons. Let me know what you guys want to see next, which season you want to see next. It's still undecided, obviously. But yeah, that is it for today. Hope you guys have enjoyed. Obviously, this is an international break and nothing else is going on for Real Madrid. We'll be back next week for the Real Sociedad game. So yeah, that is it for today. Hope you guys have enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.